Welcome to the show, Sarah. I'm so excited to have you on. It is such an honor to be able to interview you on the Home to Self podcast. For those of you who don't know, although I'm probably going to share this in the intro, but Sarah is a mentor of mine, a coach that I've been working with for almost a year now. I think in March it'll be a year, which is crazy. But I started in your Subconscious Freedom Mastermind, which was a 6 month container. And then we went straight into the Business Mastermind, which is where you're helping us, really address our business, but with the subconscious tools. And we'll share a little bit more about that at the end for people interested. But I was so excited to have you on to share with the listeners here your magic in the world of subconscious healing. And this has been a huge part of my transformation, the work that I do with clients. And yeah, it's just radically transformed my life, this work in general. And you are someone that is just so tapped in and embodied in this work, and such a beautiful reflection of what is possible when we really transform these limitations that have been deeply ingrained in our subconscious for a really long time, even generational. So I'll pause for a second, but I'd love to hear from you. Um, you know, I haven't actually heard that much about your story, and this is something I always ask the guests, because I am so fascinated with how people arrived here. I really believe in, like, we all have this soul calling, this soul mission, and like lessons that we're here to share, medicine that we're here to share with the world. And so when people are really living their dharma and their purpose, which I can definitely feel from you, I like to look back and see, what were those signs that got you here? Like, what was your unfolding of your journey that got you into this work?
Thank you for the question and thank you for the kind words. It means a lot to
Yes.
hear from you, and just working with you has been so special because you on your end hold such a potent medicine. So just to say, when you went from the mastermind to the business mastermind, I'm like, yes, let's go. Let's get Lily's medicine out there in the world. Like, you hold such powerful codes, and maybe we'll talk about them eventually on this episode today. But thank you for being here, and thank you for the kind words. And I'm happy to be in this environment with you. And to share a little bit about my story, I actually don't talk about it very often, because at this point, I'm curious if you feel this way or if listeners feel this way. I feel like I'm in a totally different world. Like, I am just not the me that even went through that story to get here. I'm in a totally different world, even than the me from 5 years ago, but I'll totally share. So, I feel like, and before I share this, I do want to share it with a caveat, because I feel like sometimes when I share this, people can get a little like, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 4. And I was like, well, I didn't either when I was 4, when it first started coming through. But after I started living my path and living my mission, then I looked back and I'm like, oh, that's why I did those things. And that's why those things happen. So I think sometimes when I share my own story, because it did start when I was 4, sometimes people are like, wait, but what? You know what I mean? Like, I don't have that, but we do. I really believe we all do. I really believe we all know early on. And then after we're already on the mission, after we're already on the path, we look back and we're like, oh, I get why I did those things. So when I always go back to this moment when I was 4, because it was a moment that I remembered, but my parents actually shared with me later. But I had two pivotal moments when I was 4. The first one was that I went up to my parents. This is so crazy. But I went up to my parents and I said, Mom, Dad, I said, I know that Jesus lives in my heart, which, whatever, like wherever that came from, I was like, I know Jesus lives in my heart. I want to do the work of God. So can you baptize me? And they were
Wow.
just like, what? Like, who is this kid? You know what I mean? Like, how intense, a 4-year-old coming up with that. And I remember my parents told me this because I was actually asking them about my story. I was like, when did you start seeing that I was like doing this
Mm.
path, that I was like doing this work? And my mom told me that story. I'm like, Mom, are you serious? A 4-year-old, I was that articulate. And then she went back and she was like, you were articulate when you were a few months old. Like, don't even like, she's like, yes, this really happened. Then I asked my dad separately because I wasn't sure if she was exaggerating. My dad was like, that really happened. So what happened after that was that my parents were in Christian churches. They're a little different than Catholic churches. My dad used to be a preacher, stepped down because he became spiritual. So he started studying Taoism and Buddhism and all these things, and started questioning, like, why can't I talk about that when I'm preaching? Like, the wisdom is all one, it's all the same. And he just stepped down, but we were still kind of involved in the communities. And so, what is required in the Christian background to get baptized is that kids usually aren't allowed to get baptized until after they're 12, and then they get tested to know that they're making a sovereign decision. So that was like how that practice works. So my parents were like, well, who are we to stop her if she wants to do the work of God? Like, who are we to stop her? So they just went ahead and brought me to different preachers to get tested, essentially, to make sure I knew what I was saying. And they agreed I did. And I got baptized when I was 4. And another moment happened when I was 4 that was like, I remember, because I had mental health issues in my family. There were different people very close in my family with mental health issues. And sometimes when things were really triggering, it was super dramatic and it was super chaotic in the household. And I remember sitting on the couch and I was like praying fervently, like praying to God. I was like, please give me the words to calm the situation. Please give me the words to calm the situation. And I remember, like, I can feel it, remember right now. I remember just like chills rushing through my body. Just like I can tear up thinking of it, but I remember like just like the chills of like peace and love. And sometimes people call them today like spirit bumps. You know what I mean? It's like that, oh, when like truth hits and you can just feel it. I remember that coming through, and I don't remember what I said. I don't remember like the situation, but I remember that moment. I can like feel myself on that couch in that moment when I was 4. So I had these pivotal moments that just kept repeating. These moments that like I knew I was here to do something, I didn't know what. And when I was little, I was obsessed with like having these spiritual conversations. Like, kids would be like outside playing and I would be sitting at the table with adults, like wanting to have this like deep conversation about God and the universe and all of these things. But as I got older, I definitely fell off the path. Like, I would say from when I was like 12 to when I was like 16 and had my first dark night of the soul, I would call those like missing years because I don't know who I was at the time. I was so disconnected from myself. I had some experiences with sexual trauma when I was 12, and I just pushed it down. And when I pushed that down, it just like I literally lost a part of myself. I was so confused. I didn't know what to do in that situation. And I remember like looking in the mirror and just being like, I'm not going to tell anyone about this. That didn't happen. And from that moment, like 12 on, it was almost like I lost a part of myself. And there was this pivotal moment when I was 16 that things just started crumbling. I went through my first dark night of the soul. And what I mean by dark night of the soul, for anyone listening, I'm sure people in your community would be aware of that verbiage. But just in case someone's not, I would call the dark night of the soul, it's like that moment where everything's crumbling away. It's like the relationships, who we think we are, things that we held tight to as like, this is who I am, this is what I do in the world, this is whatever we hold tightly to, it was all crumbling away. And I had gotten hurt in my soccer in my soccer career. I was a very competitive soccer player, and I got hurt right before a huge tournament where colleges were supposed to come and recruit. And I remember just like being distraught. I was so upset. I was obsessed with healing. So I convinced I convinced I convinced my school, and I convinced the doctor to write me a note to be bedridden. So I was being bedridden to be able to heal quicker so I could make the next tournament. I did all my schoolwork at home. But what that actually did in that moment was it left me alone with me. I couldn't go with my friends. I couldn't go, like, I was just with me. And that was when everything started crumbling because I didn't like what I was left with. I felt so uncomfortable. Like, there's no way to describe it other than someone who has felt it. But like, I felt uncomfortable in my own skin. Like, I felt like I wanted to like, oh, I wanted to like escape who I even was. And that's when I started asking deeper questions because I really got dark for a little bit in that dark night of the soul. It's like I was home, there was nothing else. I was barely eating because I just wasn't interested in food. Like it was a super low moment. And I remember having this moment of like, either I'm going to not be here anymore because I literally don't want to be here. It got so intense and I didn't understand why because I had pushed down the pain so far from the sexual experience that I literally forgot. My conscious mind actually forgot. I couldn't understand why I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. Nor did I even know when I was 16 that trauma at 12 could be impacting me when I was 16. Like I didn't put two and two together. All I knew was that I was so uncomfortable in my own skin, I just wanted to get out. So the thought was like, maybe I just get out of this life because I don't want to be here anymore. It hurts too bad. And then it was like this pivotal moment of just deciding like either I'm going to keep going down this path and not be here anymore, or I can stay on this path and be incredibly uncomfortable and just push through and fight through, or maybe I can change this. And it was like the maybe I can change this, maybe I can discover where I got so off path, like maybe I can discover where I got so lost. Maybe I can remember like the happiness I used to feel before I got so lost. It was like that maybe that really moved me. It moved me. And in those times that I didn't have much time to do anything else, I started like picking up the books that were around my house, like the book on Taoism, the book on all of these things, and just started searching. And I came across a few people early on. I came across Greg Braden, I came across Joe Dispenza, I came across Bruce Lipton, Eckhart Tolle, and then some ancient texts from like Vedic philosophy and things like this that I just was kind of surrounded by and programmed myself with. And it was this clicking moment that I realized, wait a minute, if if our subconscious is what's actually generating 95% of our reality, then maybe I have some things in my subconscious that are making me show up in my life as a me that I'm not. Like that was a big part. Like I was uncomfortable in my own skin, but I was also showing up in my life with my friends and all of these things in a way that I didn't like. I didn't like who I was being. So I was like, maybe there's something going on in my subconscious that I can uncover and really heal this. And that set me on the trajectory of healing. I remember like when the memories started coming back, I'm like, how does a brain forget this? Like, how did I actually forget that that happened? It actually scared me at first because I had mental health issues in the family, which probably motivated me to research even more because I didn't want to experience that. I wanted to understand what was really going on with that. So I was like, how could I forget sexual trauma? How could someone do that? How could I just forget that that's what was making me so uncomfortable? So that's when I went on this path of healing. And I would say from around 16 to 23, it was messy. It was confusing. It was a lot of research. It was a lot of seeking support. And it was in those times that I started, like even early 21, I started studying to be a coach, to guide others, because I realized how much people needed this information. Because in all of that time, I was like, oh my goodness, if I can heal what's making me uncomfortable in my skin, then I can actually be a different person in this life, you know? And that's when I started remembering like just the spiritual awarenesses I had early on and that I could live that path. But I also was combining those spiritual awarenesses with everything I was learning about the mind, about the subconscious, about how even if our conscious mind thinks it knows better, thinks it knows what to do, thinks it knows what behaviors to do, if our subconscious is not in alignment with that, we will not show up in the way our conscious mind wants to. And the biggest gift it gave me in the toughest time to learn about the subconscious, how it's controlling 95% of our lives, how we can change our reality when we change the subconscious. All of those were like a gift of new life. Like I really got inspired to live because I could understand, oh, wait, I can change this. But it also gave me so much compassion for myself because I really didn't like myself. I didn't like how I was showing up. But as soon as I learned, wait a minute, people show up the way they do because of subconscious programming, not because it's who they are as a soul, not because it's their only way to show up. It's because they have some kind of subconscious programming, some kind of subconscious stories, learned narratives, past trauma that is showing up on the surface and causing them to act, behave, and be a certain way. And what that gifted me when I learned that was so much compassion for myself. It was like the floodgates of compassion opened up. And that's where I got to like almost hold myself through my own transformation for years from 16 to 23. And then even though now to this day, like 10 years after the moment that I started coaching, it's like even now to this day, I would say that that compassion is really what I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's the subconscious work, and these are the tools, and they're effective and they work, right? I teach other people how to do it. You took the mastermind. But really, when it comes down to it, it's like I'm teaching people to be compassionate for all parts of themselves, to unlock the love in their hearts that is already there. And then when that's unlocked, it's like we don't have to try to heal. We don't have to try to change. We just hold ourselves through all parts of ourselves. And then that transforms us. Do you know what I mean? So like it was a long story long, I guess, but I didn't expect to tell you the details of all of it, but it just came through. I don't remember the last time I told this in such length, so hopefully it's for someone listening to this. I know it is. But it was such a gift of knowing like, oh, this is how the mind works. This is why I'm acting this way. This is why I'm behaving this way. So I can be patient with myself as I change it. And working with the subconscious, this when we get to the subconscious root of what is going on, our whole reality transforms, right? So this was just this path of pure transformation, but really a path of remembering compassion and remembering love. And when I cleared what was subconsciously in the way and just some of those narratives that were created from traumatic experiences, the love that I already was came alive. The compassion of the whole universe, the love of the whole universe that is always holding every one of us. I got to actually feel it. Instead of intellectually know it from the books I was reading, it's like I got to feel it. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I am here to guide people home to that, to the love in their hearts, to the freedom that they already are, to the ability to access that compassion for all parts of themselves. And that's really what we're doing here. But yes, we call it subconscious freedom work as well. But that was my journey to get to this point somewhat.
I love hearing that. Wow, that gives me such a, I feel like I was really there with you, like able to go through that journey. And yeah, like you said, like looking back in hindsight, everything starts to make sense, all those little pieces that we got along the way. And I think what's so relatable is the feeling you had when you were going through your dark night of the soul of just being so uncomfortable in your own skin and just not really liking who you were showing up as in your life and in your relationships, right? This is something I hear so often from women, and I understand this too. This was part of my journey. I think to some degree it's a part of all of ours. It's part of the pain that then inspires us to seek answers, right? And then it's like once we have that desire to see a better way, it's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? The books start to come in and all the information starts to come in to expand your perspective. But I'd love for you to touch on, yeah, this connection that you've touched on already in terms of us not being the subconscious identities that form our view of ourselves from such an early age, and the difference between that and like who we really are, and how the subconscious work is really what allows us to tap back into that. Because
Mm-hmm.
so many people are under this illusion that there's something wrong with them, or
Mm-hmm.
that they're just not good enough, and that they just like that's just who they are, right? We're so identified with these subconscious stories that were formed so early on. And so I think that that is where the beauty of this subconscious work really comes through. And when you start to recognize that you're operating from a program, a narrative, right, that's essentially made up of words, but it can dictate your entire reality. It, to me, it offered so much hope of like, whoa, I'm actually the person behind all of that, right? And so then that's the journey of like, can we start to crack these programs a little bit so that we can reconnect to who we really are?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so powerful when we realize that because, like you're saying, like, I'm not these stories, I'm the person observing them. That's the catalyst to freedom. That's the cascade for us to see, wait a minute, none of these have to be real. It's like this moment of like, this isn't real. Not that our experiences aren't real. Our experiences are very real to us, but we realize that we're living in a world of our own narratives and that at any moment we can change those because we aren't those narratives. We're the one listening to them. We're the one either buying into them or not buying into them. It's just most people don't know that they have a choice to not buy into those because they've been there for so long. There's a part of the story that I left out, and I was like, I wonder why I left that out. And I was like, probably because it was just so long that I left it out, but I'm actually going to bring it back in. So I mentioned that my dad had this spiritual awakening, right? And something that he told me when I got hurt when I was 16, and it was the catalyst for the dark night of the soul, something he told me nonstop. And it was so annoying, Lily, because I couldn't understand why he kept saying it. And I didn't get it yet. But he kept telling me, Sarah, you're not a soccer player. You just love playing soccer. And I'm like, you don't understand. What does that even mean? I am a soccer player and I love playing soccer. And he just kept saying, you're not a soccer player. That's not who you really are. You just love playing soccer. And I remember getting so mad at that. And this is what happens. Like, there's a couple things I shared about the dark night of the soul, but what we can also call it is an ego death. When we don't want to be here anymore, that is the first sign that it's our ego wanting to die. We don't want to exist as the false narrative that we've been existing as because it's not who we really are. And it's like something that can happen in that, like when we're right at that precipice of that breakthrough, is like anger, frustration. Like, what are you talking about? Like, maybe someone says a sentence like my dad said to me, and I'm like, what does that mean? And I was so angry about it. But that was the moment that, like, I didn't understand it then. It would take me another 10 years to really get it. But and I'm still, I feel like it's a lifetime type of journey, but it really took time to understand, what do you mean? I'm not a soccer player. I just love playing soccer. What do you mean? And then that's what actually got me to ask the question, well, if this isn't who I am, maybe I can change it. You know what I mean? If this, I don't know what's behind that. I don't know who I really am. But if I'm just the one loving doing this, maybe I can love doing something else. Like if the soccer thing doesn't work out, going to a D1 school, all of this stuff, if this doesn't work out, maybe I can love something else that I love so much that I think it's who I am. So it's these questions that started to get to me to be like, well, why did I think that was who I was? You know what I mean? Why does it feel so close? Why does it feel so close to who I am? Well, this is something I learned early on, but this is the life-changing piece of it, that when we have a subconscious narrative, it does feel like our whole world. And it's not until we either have a mirror of someone showing us that we're in that limitation, or maybe we get inspired by something that's like, wait a minute, I can live differently. Or we go through the tough experience that causes us to have no choice but to transform it. But when something has been in a subconscious narrative for so long, you know this well, it actually feels like it's who we are. It feels like when someone says to us, well, it's not real, you can change it. It's like, well, it's pretty real for me. And like people could listen to that and be like, well, come look at my bank account. That's real. Like they can make jokes about this. But of course, the effects and the reality seem real because that's how powerful we are. We are so powerful that we will create a reality field based on what we subconsciously expect. So, as much as we can be disempowered by certain narratives and feel like they are so real to us, what do we do? How do we change this? We are actually so powerful that we created a narrative that we think we're limited. But it feels so real when it's been there for decades. It's sort of like the example that I feel like is really accurate is like, it's sort of like being born with a certain color lens glasses. And it's like, if we ask the question to someone in the audience, you know this one, but if we ask the question to someone in the audience, well, what color would the world be if you were born with pink tinted glasses? Well, they would probably say, well, the world would be pink. To them, the world wouldn't be pink because that's all they know. They wouldn't know it's pink until they take off the glasses and have a contrast for them to know, oh, I've been looking through a lens this entire time. So that's exactly what these subconscious narratives are like. They're the lens we're seeing the world through, that it takes some kind of catalyst. Either, like I said before, there's like three main catalysts, I would say. It's some kind of difficulty that causes us to force, like that shatters the lens and forces us to grow. There could be inspiration, which is what I prefer, which is why I love things like masterminds, like trainings, like going to events, because we'll be inspired to grow. We'll be inspired to break out of the limiting lens. But then there's also just like this deep sense of spiritual longing that certain people have. Some people are just born with that insatiable sense to like, I want to grow, I want to learn. And yes, it could happen through inspiration outside of us, but sometimes it's that internal drive too, of someone who just believes there's got to be something better, right? So like there's a couple of different things and a lot of buckets that can go into that, but there are certain things that happen in our lives that cause us to challenge what we've thought is our whole reality. And this is where the lens comes off, and we can see in the contrast, oh, I've been looking through a lens this whole time. That's what those narratives are. But if the narratives aren't who we are, right? It was just a lens, and we can take off the lens and see a different narrative, then there's no way it could be who we are, because that's changeable. If it's changeable, it's not who we really are, right? So if the lens, we think it's who we are because we've believed it, and it can change when we take it off, then there's no way that could be who we are. So the only thing left to start to feel and understand is, wait a minute, if I wasn't that story, and it's proof that I'm not that story because I can see that a different story is possible, then who am I really? Right? And that's when we start associating more with the one who's observing the lens. Oh, I was the one experiencing what it was like to live in a reality that I thought that was the only way to live. Then we start gaining our power back to know, wait a minute, I can change this. I want to experience something different. I want to put a new lens on. I want to put a lens on that's more joyful, more loving, more passionate, more fulfilling. So we start learning more and more. The more people do subconscious freedom work, the more they get to the root of their subconscious limitations, the more they start knowing. This is like beyond a conceptualization. The more they start knowing that at any moment they can change their reality when they change their perception, because the powerful awareness that they are is infinitely powerful, infinitely creative, and can really create the reality field.
Yeah, it's wild. Like when you're in it, it is such, it becomes your entire reality. Like you said, it's really, and that's why it can be such a challenge, right? This is why they're blind spots to us. This is why coaching is so powerful in relationships that can mirror back to you where you might be caught in a story or an identity that's not actually accurate to who you really are and your full potential. But we talk about this a lot, where over your life, when you have a limitation, your mind's going to find evidence to support it. Whatever you believe to be true, like you will find evidence to support that. And so people start to act as if that is a reality, and we'll talk about some of the common subconscious limitations that you've seen in just a moment to make it more like to get more specific. But it really is so wild because it's such a real experience for you. You have the anxiety to prove it. You have the lack of money in your bank account to prove it. You have the failed relationships to prove it. But what really hit me when I first started going on this journey is recognizing that no matter how much evidence I have to support my narrative, that doesn't make it absolutely true. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And something Peter Crone says all the time is like, if I were to cut you open, would I find a physical manufacturing label that states, I don't know, you're not enough, or you're not safe, or you're not loved? And the answer is always no. And so it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I wasn't born into this world just not good enough, or like there was something wrong with me, right? These are stories that were embedded at such a young age when we can't even really remember when that started. But then we started to feed into the story and gain so much evidence, and we just started to mold into this person that lives as if that is 100% true. And so, yeah, it's like when we reach that dark night of the soul where we don't want to be here anymore, it's usually that part that wants to die off, so like we can come back to the soul that we are, the person, the being that can change and transform and create a different reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's such an important piece that you brought up that evidence, because this is the tricky part of creating freedom from those narratives. And what we mean by narratives is so deep, because it's like not just a story, it's actually who we perceive we are on the deepest levels. Like that's a subconscious narrative. It's like you said, like something like I'm not good enough or things like this, those narratives that people have that are so beyond just a limiting belief, because limiting beliefs people are conscious of. They can just work on transforming them, right? When it's a subconscious narrative, it's so deep, it's actually who they perceive they are in the world. Now, the thing about, like you said, what Lily was saying before, what you were saying before, is that then our mind will then go seek evidence to prove that, right? So if someone has some kind of a narrative like they're not good enough, and they don't know they have that narrative, usually it's not good enough, so it's not usually a good one. Usually people are pretty aware of that because our society is constantly telling people that. But so usually people are pretty aware of that one, but maybe the not good enough isn't actually not good enough. It's actually that they inherently don't feel loved, right? So they don't feel loved, which then causes them to feel like no matter what they do, it's never good enough for them to receive love, because they don't feel like they could be at the deepest levels. What that actually looks like to see evidence of that is that they'll then go and look back at every relationship. And even if this isn't how the relationship actually went, they will see and look for countless evidence in that relationship that made them think they weren't good enough. Right? It's like no matter what I did, it just wasn't ever good enough. No matter, and every time I'm with someone, it constantly happens. So this is just the way it is for me. Maybe they go into a career or a business venture and they always hit that glass ceiling, and they're looking at that as evidence for why they still aren't good enough. Right? So it's not because that's what it actually meant. It's because that's the narrative they had, and they placed that narrative on the experience. Now, because on the deepest levels, we're living in this participatory universe. One of the greatest quantum physicists, John Wheeler, said, we're living in a participatory universe. We are tiny patches of the universe building itself while simultaneously observing itself. So, in our observation of this universe, we're learning this in quantum physics over and over. In this observation of the universe, the way we look at it transforms it. So, the tricky thing, the self fulfilling prophecy of these subconscious narratives is that when a narrative is there, the ego and the mind itself, the entire awareness, will constantly be looking for evidence of that being true, even where the evidence isn't. So it's like someone could actually be saying, no, you're doing great, honey. What do you mean you're not good enough? I'm so grateful for you. But they won't actually hear it or feel it. They'll be like, but you said yesterday that this wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? They'll just look for the evidence to reinforce that narrative. And the tricky thing is, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because we're in a universe that is responding to the way we observe it. So then we will attract someone who will reinforce those things to us. So even if the person didn't at first, they might start reinforcing it because we've trained them into that behavior through our own observation of it. So it's such a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it sounds daunting when we explain it this way, but it's actually incredibly freeing because it's so wild to experience. But anytime I guide someone to creating freedom from any type of limitation, when they look back on the side of freedom from that limitation, their evidence starts changing. And it's wild. It happens every time. I had a client who had somewhat recently, she was a powerful healer in the space, very powerful. She connected people to like their guides and other realms, and super powerful healer. But she kept hitting a glass ceiling in her business. And she came in and she's like, I'm just wondering why this feeling keeps coming up. She's like, I know I'm infinite. I know I have infinite potential. I know I'm creating this. She's like she's there spiritually. But there was a narrative deep down that started in her formative years when she was in school. But she had a narrative deep down that she thought that if she stepped in to help other people, she would just make it worse. So when she was in high school, this is where it really started, but not started, but really where it peaked. Usually it starts in our formative years, but it can peak in areas like that. When she was in middle school or high school, she had this experience where her friends were fighting and they were like really going at it, and she stepped in to be the mediator and she calmed it down. But then both friends didn't want to be friends with her anymore. So she felt like if I step in, I make it worse. And the caveat was that then I lose love, then I lose friendship. So if I step in, then I lose love. So we could see why there would be a cap in her business that is causing her to step in and help other people heal. It's amazing that she was even in that business. It was such a testament to how powerful she already was. Because in the face of that limitation, she still created a business around it, like powerful being. So then when we went in and she realized that she could never lose love, there's no way to make it worse. And she could never lose love. That was really the core of it, right? She could never lose love because she is love. It's within her. These people were not lost. What actually happens is that the energy's transformed. It made space for new love to come in. So when we cleared the idea that she could ever lose love, and what then happened is she never worried. She no longer had to worry about messing it up because there is no messing it up because there's nothing to mess up because she can't lose love. So when she figured out that she couldn't lose love, she was completely free of that. She then looked back at the circumstance and she's like, you want to know what happened next that I never really realized? She's like, the counselor of the school then came to meet with me because he wanted to learn about how I was mediating things. So she started meeting with the counselor weekly to teach the counselor how to mediate issues in the school with kids. So she's
Wow.
like, "Oh my goodness, I'm born for this." Like literally the same situation that she carried for decades as evidence of how if she stepped in, she would mess it up and lose love, was actually when she freed herself from the narrative, she saw new evidence of how that situation was actually a representation of how she was born for this, how she's designed for this, how she's naturally good at this. So it's amazing what happens. And I share that because if anyone is seeing countless evidence for the limitation, it's so powerful to remember that as soon as like it's like a mantra. It's like as soon as I'm free of this, I'll see a different perspective. I know there's a higher perspective of this. There's another way to look at this. Because as soon as we free ourselves from the fogginess of our own limitations, clarity comes, higher perspectives come, and we see things differently. And that's just so amazing. So no matter what evidence is there, there's always opportunities to see it differently. And when we're free of the limitation, it actually arrives, right?
Yeah, I love that example. It's just, to me, there's nothing better than that light bulb moment where someone just sees past that limitation, right? Because it just proves that it's not about our circumstances, it's about how we're perceiving them and relating to them. And I think this work, like we mentioned earlier, comes back so much to self-compassion, but it it almost is like the prerequisite to having self-compassion naturally, I think, because when you understand where these patterns that have cascaded into behaviors and actions and results, but when you can go back and realize that it comes from it, like it makes sense, it comes from a story and an experience you've had, like this client, it makes sense that she kind of adopted that subconscious belief and limitation. We don't judge things as much, we don't judge ourselves as much because we have a greater understanding, right? But when we don't understand something, we judge it and then we just think we are the problem, we're broken, we're wrong. And so
Mhm.
that's where I
Or
really love
someone
this.
else,
Or
right?
someone else, yeah. Yeah. And so, you know from here, the question that I'm sure everyone's thinking at this point is like, but how do we do this? Like, how can we start to reveal these subconscious patterns when they are in the subconscious, right? Which means we're not aware of them until we start doing a little bit of digging. And there's so many
Mhm.
different kinds of approaches to this work, but yeah, how would you, and it gets really complex, I think, too, because it's so individual depending on the circumstance, but how would you advise people to start uncovering their own limitations?
Yeah. And you started with something that is like so important, which is the awareness that no matter what we're doing and or no matter what phase our life is showing up as, It's happening because there's something subconsciously going on. It's not anyone's fault. It's not even a fault because the narratives that humans pick up, like they're not even theirs. It's not even like some of these things, like, yes, our soul wants to go through experiences, which is why we would pick up a certain narrative. But so many of these can just be melted away because it's not even theirs. They just picked it up from their school, their parents, their caregivers. And when we understand that we're acting, we're behaving, we're showing up, we're feeling what we're feeling because of these subconscious narratives, it gives us the gift of self compassion, like you said. Because it's like, oh my goodness, I am literally doing the best I can before I subconsciously know better, not before I consciously know better. People get hard on themselves because they think they should know better because their conscious mind knows. But it doesn't matter because the subconscious mind is generating 95% of our reality. So we want to understand, well, it matters to some degree that the conscious mind grows because the conscious mind can also teach the subconscious. So it does matter, but it does matter that the conscious mind knows. The reason I said it doesn't matter is because the weight of the subconscious will outweigh that. The power of the subconscious will outweigh that. And we will act, we will behave, we will feel. Our nervous system will respond in the way that's in alignment with the subconscious. So the first precursor is the awareness of knowing that we are all doing the best we can before we subconsciously know better. That allows for self-compassion, which then allows for the curiosity it takes to actually see into the limitation. Because the way that limitations will show up, especially in our everyday lives, it is so tempting to blame other people for them. It's so tempting to blame ourselves and get frustrated. So then we get avoidant to actually looking into the limitation. And sometimes it can be tempting to kind of like power through, like to like some people like get tempted to like work so hard and work so hard through it and move so much through it that they're not actually seeing into their blind spots. So that's why I took the time to break down the self-compassion piece that you mentioned as well. Because what it does is it allows us to observe ourselves with way more compassion and a little bit more detachment. No matter how we're showing up, this isn't who I am. What this is actually showing me is something that I'm going to heal so I can be more of who I am, so I can live the life I want to live. So when we are facing, like, I wanted to share that because it's so important so we can see into instead of avoid where the subconscious limitation is. Because anytime we're challenged in life, anytime that we are challenged and struggling, there will be a subconscious limitation underneath. This is a big one. But a different way to say that, that's a little bit more compassionate and a little bit more loving, is like anytime we're challenged or struggling, there's an opportunity for us to evolve more into who we came here to be. So that's the same thing, just said with a little bit more encouragement and compassion, right? Same thing though. So anytime there's a challenge, anytime that we are tempted to blame, so if we are tempted to blame our partner, if we're tempted to blame our parents, if we're tempted to blame the coworker or the boss, anytime that we want to blame, we know that there's a subconscious narrative that's wanting freedom. So challenges and blame, two biggest insights. It's like we could say that subconscious limitations are subconscious, we're not aware of them, but the universe is mirroring to us who we are on the deepest subconscious levels all the time. When we know that, it's so much less of a mystery than we think. Because it's like, well, where is my life not a 10 out of 10? You know what I mean? It's like, where is there an area that cycles keep showing up? The same issues, the same emotional dramas, the same type of projections. Maybe we blame the partner, like, you always do this. Why can't you just do this differently? It's like when those things are coming out, it's like, ooh, okay, there's something for me in this. There's something to heal. There's some kind of subconscious perspective that's limiting me. And we know that. We know it's a limitation because if it wasn't, it wouldn't be challenging for us. Because at the core of it, we are these free, sovereign, divine beings that have the potential to be masters of our reality fields. Like, this is the potential that everyone listening to this has, that we can be masters of this reality field. So anything that is causing us to feel that pain, that suffering, that is where we have the biggest insight into, oh, there's some kind of a subconscious narrative limiting me in this area of my life. And it doesn't even have to be just pure pain and suffering. It can also just be like, where am I trying really hard to do something that it's just not working? So maybe someone's hitting a glass ceiling in their income or glass ceiling in their business. Those are the first signs. Oh, there's something subconsciously going on. That as soon as I create freedom from this, we get to experience a whole new level of reality. Like I mentioned before, to really wrap this up, because it's an important point, is that this reality field is mirroring to us who we are, who we perceive we are on the deepest subconscious levels all the time. So it's not that much of a mystery when we're paying attention, but it does take a lot of self responsibility that calls for a lot of self compassion to be able to be like, ooh, okay, let's dig in. I'm doing the best I can before I subconsciously know better. This is refinement. And it's not fault, it's not blame, it's just continuous refinement. And it starts turning into this game of like, let's see how good it can get. I'm uncovering limitations in myself all the time. I've been doing this work, it feels like forever, but it's beautiful because it's like, oh, let's see how good it can get. Let's see what next level is available. Because when we have the courage to be able to take responsibility for those challenges, take responsibility for those limitations, get curious. What is this here to show me? I know this is revealing something for me in it. I know there's an opportunity to become more of who I came here to be through this. Then we get curious about, I wonder what perceptions are causing me to think I'm limited. Not what's limiting me, it's what perceptions are causing me to think I'm limited. What are the stories I'm telling about this? What are my perceptions about it? Even if someone automatic writes those things, what are my stories I'm telling about this? What do I think will happen when I get to the other side of this, when I get the manifestation, when I get to the other side of this? Start writing out those stories, start speaking out those stories with a mentor. The limitations will just come out. So we might not notice them because, like I mentioned in the beginning, we have the lenses on. It's hard to see that we're in the limitation. But when we know how the reality field works, that it's mirroring to us who we perceive we are in the deepest levels, what we subconsciously expect on the deepest levels, then all we have to do is look into those challenges and we can see them.
Yeah. And this is really the difference between the victim mentality and the creator, right? And that is such a big shift. It literally changes your entire life because even just the way that you're explaining that, right? Like you really see triggers and challenges now as an opportunity of like, ooh, here's another thing that I can dissolve so that I can access like even more of my potential. And when you recognize that our potential is literally limitless, that's why there isn't an end to it, but we don't view it anymore as something that needs fixing, but it's like, ooh, let me explore this a little bit deeper. Like here's another challenge that's an opportunity to grow and expand and evolve. But that is such a different perspective than most people, and I mean especially myself and my family. Like victim mentality is like at the core of all the suffering that I experience. I mean, I think that this is at the root of all suffering, really. But in my family, this has been such a deeply, like, just ingrained pattern of really feeling victimized by life and then continuing to gather evidence for that. And it's tricky. And I have so much compassion for people who, yeah, have just experienced some really, really challenging things in their lives that, you know, seem justifiable for them
Mm-hmm.
being on the receiving end of that and as the victim. But really, when you start to understand this work and how life is mirroring so much of what is being held in the subconscious, then it becomes this fun game. And that's how you often explain it too, where it really does become so much more exciting because you realize, oh, here's another opportunity for me to expand my worldview and my view of myself and then create and step into a new reality, right? Jump timelines. Like it becomes way more exciting than feeling so powerless as the victim, feeling like you need to constantly control life and pay attention and try to prevent, things from happening because you feel like you have no control, you have no influence. And that, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is just such a different life to step into.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you did. You're transforming your whole bloodline with this empowerment. So I'm glad you found like the core of how to transform this. But even when we find the core, when things are really deep, it can be like it can be almost insidious, like, oh, this is easy to dip into. Like, I know this well. I've been trained in this. It's in my blood to dip into this. So those are the things that are like the deeper soul lessons. When it's something that's easy to dip into, when it's a family line, like we know that we're looking into something our soul signed up to receive the other side of, to experience the other side of, to refine through the visceral experience here on earth of the other side of that. But the thing with victimhood on this planet too is that there has been so much manipulation on this planet. There has been so many things that are abhorred that almost every being on this planet has been through something unthinkable, you know? And like this is something that we're transcending out of. We're actually in a time of great awakening. We're in a time where consciousness is evolving on this planet. That's why these conversations are so everywhere, because consciousness is evolving on this planet. We are in a time of great awakening. But with that time of great awakening, we're also all processing so much of the past hurt, so much of the past trauma. But the thing I want to share with some people, because I see some people do this, it's not on people to heal that. You know, even people healing their family lines, it's not on your shoulders. Like your family line did a lot. You know what I mean? Like they did good. What actually happens is the family line is like, has their hands on your back and is like, go now experience a whole new world. Now experience a whole new level of this. We did the best we could over here. Now go experience this at the next level. So it's much different than thinking they have all that trauma on their back, because they don't. It's quite different than that. It's like we are so supported in creating freedom. But I talked about what's happening on the planet because there are abhorrent things that have happened to so many beings that are easy to go into victim narrative, right? It's so easy to be like, wait a minute, you're telling me my subconscious has this in me and that's why I experienced that. It's like, no, but your soul knows what will happen when you process this. And there's on some level, and as we zoom out, some kind of an agreement to the experience because it's going to help you become more of who you came here to be. So there are so many ways that people can go into victimization, and it's easy to. Because like we could probably sit here for so long talking about abhorrent things that might have happened to people in your family and good reason why they felt victimized by life. But it's not about saying, okay, well, now it's my fault and I need to transform this. It's about getting curious to what is in this for me? How is this going to help me become who I came here to be? And I promise, no matter what anyone has been through, there are aspects of it that have helped them become who they are today. And if we really go into it, there are certain gifts, like hidden in the darkness, hidden in the shadows. There are gifts that will help them really express who they came here to express as a soul when they start looking at the situation instead of from victim of why did this happen to me, getting curious. I wonder what's for me in this. I wonder how this is here to help me evolve. What's my opportunity in it? How did it help me become who I am today? When people start doing that, it's almost like they start uncovering the gift of life. Like, hey, I'm putting my hands out, like in like giving something, because like they're understanding the gift of life that might have come in a distortion. It might have come in a distorted way because there's been a lot of manipulation on the planet, but there is a gift in it. And oh my goodness, any being who has chosen to come here now is a master. There's not one being that's a victim, because it's not easy to be here at this moment of awakening. But when we can remember our power and remember that there is something for us in everything, like, can you feel like it just makes people unshakable? It makes people grow into who they came here to be at such a profound level, at such a profound speed, too. When we start looking at life as if it's happening for us, as if there's something for us in it, which is so beautiful. But there's good reason for a lot of people to feel like they're a victim to things, right? There's good reason. It just won't serve, you know? It just doesn't serve. Because the more we hold that energy, the more we subconsciously make ourselves feel powerless to change it. That's a tricky trap of that. But when we can remember, wait a minute, I'm a powerful being. No matter what happened, one, it's over. right? It's not still happening. It's over is the big thing. And I can transform myself through this. I can let it evolve me. So it's so empowering when we can remember that when we take responsibility for it, not to say it's our fault, there's no fault. When we take responsibility for it, it gives us the power to find the gift, to evolve our souls, which is really what we're here doing to some degree.
Yeah. I love that view. Really. It's only through contrast that we can see this, and so that's also sometimes it's like we have to kind of experience the other side of it, the darkness, the struggle in order to really reveal the gift and appreciate it and be embodied in the transformation of that, which might be exactly what our soul came here to experience so that we could help others. And so really it's like asking better questions, you'll get better answers. And it's just like you start to rewire the way that you view life and the way that you view yourself and your potential and like your lessons. And it's just this, it becomes addictive, honestly, to me. I'm
Yeah.
just like, it starts to become exciting instead of this constant like swimming upstream and this like battle and like, oh, this healing never ends. Like, I'm not ever going to get there. Right? It's a completely different approach. And that's what makes it so exciting. So,
Yeah. Lily, how did you, because I feel like we talked about victimhood and you were talking about how you got your, that was in your family. So what were some ways that you allowed yourself to really free yourself from it? Like what were some of the big insights for you?
mm, I mean, you know, for sure it still comes in layers and in different areas of my life, but it was really experiencing so much struggle of like me hitting a glass ceiling of my own ability to heal my body. For me, it was very physical because I was very attached to like how my worth being how I looked and my actual physical health. And so I had experienced so much transformation in such a short period of time when I transformed the exterior things, the diet and the lifestyle, and I was meditating, these kinds of things. And I experienced so much transformation so quickly. And then it started to get worse and worse. And it broke my brain because on paper I was doing all the things and
Wow.
more, and it wasn't working anymore. And so then I think I hit such a level of frustration and self hatred because I didn't understand what was happening subconsciously. And so I just blamed myself. I was like, well, I must not be trying hard enough. Oh, it must be that one little cheat meal that I had. And it was just this vicious cycle. It was creating so much stress in my body. And then things, yeah, I feel like I started to hit that point where information started to land that I had never heard of before. That's where Peter Crohn's work came in. The documentary Heal was really big for me, recognizing how I was sabotaging myself without even knowing it. Right. And this
Mm,
is like, that happens to so many people. Is like there's a contradicting narrative deep down that is the only reason why we can't get to that next step and we can't heal. And it
yeah.
just invited in this huge theme of self responsibility that I had never seen before, and I was not raised, to understand. Um, yeah, it was just always looking at like, why is this happening to me, and I had so much complaining, and I used to just be, yeah, just like I'd feel so bad for myself all the time, and I was just like, why, why? Look at all this effort, and I would find more reason to support that. And then
Yeah.
eventually I just recognized I'm like, whoa, my body knows how to heal. My subconscious plays a huge role in my life. How am I talking to myself? Like, how am I causing stress in my body, which is the prerequisite for disease? Like, all
Mhm.
these things started to bubble up. And I was like, whoa. I was like, what if I do the opposite of what I've been doing and stop restricting so intensely and stop going to the gym so I can prove to myself that I really do have the power to heal. And it's more so about reconnecting to my truth than it is about finding a solution and like this control, forceful tactic. And it just really started to transform my life. And so then I just wanted more and more and more. So
Wow.
it's been a journey, but yeah, I'm just so grateful because now I see it everywhere. I'm like, the responsibility piece is really the access point to freedom when we recognize it's not our fault, but we do have the power to transform it and it's here for us. I mean, that alone can absolutely change the trajectory of someone's life if they really get it and choose that.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. So powerful. And you spoke to like such a pivotal shift that happens when people go from victimhood to now stepping in their power, is that when people are in victimhood, they're living in a world of force. There's no way not to. They have to try to feel better. They have to try to do the thing. They have to try, because victimhood makes people feel powerless subconsciously, which then what would happen if someone feels powerless but needs to exist? They're going to force themselves to do things. This is exhausting. This is definitely a precursor to dis-ease in the body over time, and depending on intensity of someone feeling it. But when someone's in victimhood, they're in that forceful energy. But when they bring in the self-responsibility, when they remember, instead of being forceful, they become powerful. So it's no longer like I have to try to do this thing. It's like, no, this is who I am and this is what I do. It's no longer like I have to try to do these things to heal, to go to the gym, to do these things because I have to force myself to get better. It's like, wait a minute, I am already healed. My body knows how to heal. And I am a powerful being that's choosing to be healed. I am a powerful being. So it goes from force to heal to power. It goes force to true power, not power, force power, true internal, inherent, infinite power. And we could say it's just like love. It's not to be corny, but it's like I'm powerful because I am love. I am. And that's an infinite source of power. So it's no longer like I have to try so hard, it's just I am, right? So it's powerful because like I heard it in the language of like forcing myself to do it, and then I took responsibility, and then I went to the other side. So really cool that you shared the story.
Yeah, I love that you touch on the difference there between power and force because we've been so brainwashed to, like, as a collective, the narrative has been like power looks this one way, which is forceful, right? It's discipline and hard work and like authority. And I don't know, to me, it's been constructed as this very like forceful energy. But true power, the way that I see it now, really is like so deeply connected with surrender and trust and that connection to this reality that we're in, that we're a part of, and like our true nature and our connectedness to this quantum field. And so that is, yeah, it really is something that like is more experienced than just like intellectually understood, but
Yeah,
it's such a different way of creating than forcing, which is
yeah,
coming because even if you think about it, it's like the only reason you'd have to force is because you're somehow not, like, you don't feel worthy enough or capable enough or safe enough to do it any other way. You're fighting something, which is
hmm
resistance, which is going against. It's like you're not, it's not the path of least resistance. It's not going with the current.
yeah.
And
And what we're also describing, just like I talked about how the planet is evolving in consciousness, there is an ascension of consciousness happening on the planet. A big part of that ascension of consciousness is bringing balance to the masculine and feminine again. So what we're describing in a very literal way is what it's like when the masculine is out of balance without its own element of feminine, because then it just becomes force. It becomes, okay, I'm masculine. I go out. I have to do this. I'm the provider. Like it goes out into that masculine force, but it's not even true masculine energy without, like, every element of each energy has one another. But a masculine that's in his true power is also aware that he can be soft too, that he can be like loving too. He can be nurturing too. He can be strong and out there, but he can also know that he's good. He's held, he's powerful. So it's bringing in this essential, this really lost feminine and really distorted masculine, and bringing it back to center. Like you said, when we're truly powerful, we're able to surrender. We're surrendered with the flow, right? So it's this element of coming back into that feminine energy, which is incredibly powerful, but it's a different kind of power. It's like the power of the cosmos in the womb. You know what I mean? It's like that level of power. It's a different element of it, but both of them together create such a strong force that is true power, right? It's not forced power because we think we can't, or we think we have to, or we think there's no other way. It's the energy of knowing I'm held here, I'm good. And I'm going to go create from this energy of knowing it's all working out for me. I'm going to go create from this energy of knowing I'm held in from the entire universe. The entire universe is holding me. So, with that love and devotion, my gratitude for the universe, my love for the universe, this is what the divine feminine is doing. It's this act of devotion, it's this act of devoted love to the entire universe that we then say, okay, how can I now go give this gift of life back to life? Which is like, then we use the masculine energy of like, now let's go create, let's go act, let's go create structure around this gift and let's go give it. But it's such a representation of what's been so distorted for so long. It's like we'll see those themes again and again and again in many different ways, whether we talk about the psychology of, the subconscious getting in the way of limitations and what happens when we go from victimhood to inner power. It's like this theme over and over and over as we continue evolving in consciousness. It's bringing those energies and harmonizing them, not as man or woman. That is an element of the play, but it's of knowing that we have both within us and finding our unique balance of that.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautifully said. It's like it really is that balance that we're trying to find, and that it's like that sweet spot, that we get to where it's like we are inspired to create. We're not reacting and creating from a forceful place, but really that yeah, I see that as like the collective shift that's happening right now, where the feminine energy is coming back to balance out the masculine, and that is where we really see that power coming through in a more authentic way, in a more powerful way, like true power. And
Mhm.
so I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're at an hour. I feel like we could talk for another 5 hours, but my last question to start wrapping this up is, I just wonder if there's a message that wants to come through you. We've covered so much for people to understand like the power of this work and how to start to shift your perspective to more curiosity, to start to go on this path yourself and see it as a journey of continuing to grow and expand and evolve into your potential, right? Instead of this victim mindset of like, why is this always happening to me? And I'm broken, and these kinds of stories we tell ourselves. But if someone is right now feeling just like overwhelmed and stuck and stagnant and just feeling like a lack of self-worth, yeah, I'm curious if there's a message that wants to come through for, and this might be also related to like something maybe you needed to hear back in the day when you were first going on this journey, but some words of inspiration of like how to start and how to start taking steps forward to change the way you've been doing things and change the reality you experience.
Yeah. So what's coming through to share right now is that it really, as much as we talked about some of the complexities of it, it really is simple and it starts with a decision. It really, really all starts with a decision. Because anyone listening to this, no matter how stuck or stagnant or any of the things, that as soon as you decide, I want something better, I want something more. I want to experience freedom. I want to experience healing. I want to experience a better life. As soon as you decide, I am going to do this, I'm going to do this. As soon as you decide, everything will start shifting. You will hear the right person that is meant to teach you. You will have an insight to sign up for a workshop. Like you were mentioning before, books will fall off the bookshelf, but it starts with you deciding. No matter how stuck anyone feels, remember your cells are dying and being reborn every few seconds. You are a different you than when you first started listening to this episode. So allow yourself to remind yourself of that and know that at any moment you can decide. And when you decide, you want freedom, when you decide you are healing, when you decide that you are remembering who you really are, you're going to remember why you came here, you're going to live your soul mission, you're going to give this gift of life back to the all, you're going to contribute in some way. When you decide, everything will start shifting. What it really takes is a decision. From the decision, you will be carried, you will be held. You are truly so held in this universe. You are so loved, you are so appreciated. It doesn't matter what you've done, it's all forgiven. You are so loved. As soon as you decide, everything will start shifting and you'll feel yourself carried by a force that's hard to explain. It will carry you to exactly where you're meant to go. You'll feel what I'm saying. You will eventually feel it. If you don't feel it now, maybe you feel it with the words I'm saying, but you are so held here. And everything that happened is a part of the great story of your life. And as soon as you decide, things will start shifting. And at any moment, you can decide.
I'm so glad I asked that. That was beautiful. Yeah, it's and then it goes into like the you become like you start dancing with life a little bit more instead of I think the overwhelm comes with so much information and feeling like you have to figure it all out. But that is again a forceful approach and a fearful approach that you're not trust like held and that life isn't wanting to help you, right? And so it's just like that decision. I love that it simplifies it and it really starts this whole process of you starting to play with life and play with the subconscious and ask for more and you're shown and the path starts to reveal itself. So really that one decision can really change your whole life. So thank you.
Yeah.
I really that was beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And the last piece I would add to that is that no matter what the perspective is, there's always a higher perspective. Just
Mm.
keep telling yourself that over and over. No matter what the limitation is, no matter what the perspective is, there's always a higher perspective. So when you combine deciding and seeking the higher perspective, you're golden. You're golden. You're golden. You will guide yourself. Your inner power will come alive. So that's just like a little piece that was kind of yelling in the background
Yeah.
as we were closing this out.
Yeah, it's like how can I see this from a higher perspective, right? Even in hindsight, like how may I look at this and see that it's happening for me? There's so many beautiful questions, and um, yeah, I really appreciate you. I'm gonna ask you the final questions. I usually do a little rapid fire, but I'm just gonna ask you the last one because it's one of my favorites. So this podcast is called Home to Self, and I always love to ask my guests at the end of the episode, what does coming home to yourself mean to you?
Mm. It means remembering that I'm everything.
Yes.
Remembering that I'm everything. I don't know how else to describe that. That's my answer.
It's a feeling. I get it. Yeah, it's like if you know, you know, right? But we all are. We all are everything, and that's the beauty, and that's why we do the subconscious work to remove the lenses that are distorting our perception of that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's
Thank you
beautiful.
so much, Sarah. You have impacted my life in a huge way, and I'm sure that everyone listening to this has also received so many codes and breakthroughs already and just shifts in perspective, and that really is a miracle. As they say in A Course in Miracles, a shift in perspective is really a miracle, and you offer
Mhm.
that every day. And just your like feminine essence of like there's such a nurturance behind the way that you explain this work, which can sometimes be very masculine and very like structured, is something that I just find so helpful and welcoming. So I just want to say thank you. And yeah, before you get off, please share what you have going on in your world. How can people connect with you? Because I can't recommend your work enough and your spaces that
Oh,
you hold.
thank you so much. So there are a few things. I run a free session every month. So every once a month in the free community, people can join in and they can watch this work happen live. It's one thing to hear me talk about it. It's another thing to like witness a session where someone becomes free in like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, someone becomes free before our eyes. But the reason I invite people in to watch these things is one, they can raise their hand and receive support from me for free. But two, we also heal a part of ourselves when we watch this work. Just watching someone heal through a subconscious limitation expands our minds. It heals a part of ourselves. We start asking better questions to actually get to the limitation. So I'd invite people to come into the free community. That's a great place to get started and start diving in and seeing this work happen. I also have the Subconscious Freedom Mastermind that you mentioned, and there's two levels of it. So there's one level for someone's personal healing, and what the subconscious mastermind is designed to do is to really rewire your own brain to be able to guide yourself to healing, to be able to see into your own blind spots, to be able to create freedom from anything holding you back. So the mastermind is designed in a special way so that you just start doing this work on yourself. Like it's like could seem like steps, but it really just starts happening. Like I just had a client the other day who he was like, I thought I wasn't getting the steps. He's like, I wasn't sure if it would just take a long time to land. And then I realized I'm just handling everything differently. He's like, I'm not as triggered. I'm working myself through these things. He's like, I'm way more emotional regulated because the whole mastermind is designed so that it just becomes a part of what you do. It's super natural the way we do it. So there's one level of the mastermind for personal healing and transformation, for your personal healing transformation. There's a level 2 of the mastermind for coaches and healers, where I train people in how to do this work with other people. So the mastermind is a 6-month training. That's the space to be. And like you mentioned, you're in the business mastermind. I keep that tight knit for people who've graduated the mastermind. So if people like find a resonant home with the work that I do, being able to do the subconscious freedom work, I love to guide them in business so we can take their work to the next level. So the business mastermind becomes available after that. I also have another training with Tim Tactics, and we do an ascension training. So this one is really designed for people who are star seeds, people who are really focused on their ascension, their spiritual growth and ascension. And these people, you want to know what's going on in the world. You want to be at your peaceful center, regardless of the chaos. This is information that we really believe everyone deserves to know, of like understanding the shift in consciousness that's happened, the shifts that have happened 15,000 years ago, what to expect as we shift to higher levels of consciousness, because people really should have been prepared to understand the weird things. Like, you aren't crazy, you're ascending in consciousness. The planet is doing that. And the chaos is a representation of the old falling away and the new is going to be born. But there is a way to thrive through these times. So we're really creating a home for ascension, where when people come into Ticket to Ride, that's the training, they come in once, they invest once, but then they have lifetime access. So we have a whole community of people who like keep growing together, keep learning together. This is like for people who are really focused on ascension. So anyone who's focused on their ascension and consciousness, star seeds, people who are interested in the secrets of the universe, that gets covered there. That's Ticket to Ride. For personal healing, transformation, subconscious freedom work, focus on that. That's the mastermind. And those are the worlds that I have going on.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's something for everyone, and I love the free community too. It's so beautiful just if you just want to get a taste and be part of a beautiful community that, is like-minded and focusing on this work. So I'll make sure to include all your links in the show notes below for easy access, as well as your Instagram, so people can go follow your work there and everything that you share. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time. This was such a great conversation.
Thank you, Lily. And I'm so happy to continue working with you in the business mastermind too, and getting your potent codes out with the world. Oh my God, you're such a powerful being. You're such a powerful guide. And, it's my honor to be here with you. And I was excited to talk to you today. So thank you. Thank you for
Mm,
having me.
thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right,
Thank you. You
everyone.
too.
Thank you. We will see you next time.
Bye.